If you want to understand why cancer rates have nearly doubled in the last 40 years, don't look at genetics, don't look at environmental toxins alone, look at what's sitting on your kitchen counter right now. Because here's something that will stop you cold. Researchers now estimate that up to 40% of all cancer cases are directly linked to lifestyle and dietary choices, not genetics. That means the food decisions you're making 3 times a day are either building a cellular environment where cancer cannot survive or slowly handing it everything it needs to grow. Hi, I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and cancer metabolism researcher. And after nearly 15 years in emergency medicine, I've watched what happens when cancer wins. But I've also spent the last decade deep inside the research on cancer cell metabolism, and what I've found contradicts almost everything most people believe about cancer prevention. Right now, inside every single person watching this, microscopic tumors are trying to grow. That's not fear-mongering, that's biology. By age 50, nearly 40% of women have microscopic breast tumors. By age 60, half of all men have latent prostate cancer cells. Your immune system is designed to find and destroy these cells before they become dangerous. But 4 specific foods that most people eat daily are systematically feeding these cancer cells the exact fuel they need, while simultaneously crippling your immune system's ability to stop them. Most people have been told that cancer prevention is about avoiding carcinogens, getting screened early, and hoping their genetics are favorable. You've probably heard that cancer is largely a matter of bad luck, that it's mostly genetic, that there's not much you can do beyond avoiding cigarettes and getting mammograms. But after spending years studying cancer cell metabolism and reviewing hundreds of peer-reviewed studies, I've come to understand something that quietly contradicts that fatalistic belief. Cancer cells don't just randomly appear and take over. They require very specific conditions to survive and thrive. Think of cancer cells like an invasive plant species trying to take root in your garden. That plant needs particular soil conditions, specific nutrients, and the absence of natural predators to spread. Your body is that garden. And 4 foods that most people consume daily are creating the exact soil conditions cancer needs, providing the precise nutrients it craves, and simultaneously poisoning the immune cells that would normally pull those weeds before they spread. Here's what most people never hear from their doctor. Cancer cells have a fundamentally different metabolism than normal cells. This was discovered nearly a century ago by a German scientist named Otto Warburg, who won the Nobel Prize for this finding. Normal cells use oxygen to efficiently generate energy from glucose. Cancer cells, even when oxygen is abundant, preferentially use a primitive fermentation process that requires massive amounts of glucose. This is called the Warburg effect, and it's not some fringe theory. It's the basis for how PET scans detect cancer. When you get a PET scan, they inject radioactive glucose into your bloodstream and watch where it accumulates. Cancer lights up like a Christmas tree because it's consuming glucose at 10 to 15 times the rate of normal tissue. Now here's where it gets critical. The 4 foods we're about to discuss don't just provide glucose. They create a systematic metabolic environment that cancer cells exploit at multiple levels. They spike insulin, which directly promotes cancer cell growth. They trigger chronic inflammation, which damages DNA and suppresses immune function. They provide specific building blocks that cancer cells need to replicate. And they actively interfere with your body's built-in cancer surveillance mechanisms. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further. This is not about blame. If you've been eating these foods, it's not your fault. The food industry has spent billions of dollars making these foods hyper-palatable, widely available, and culturally normalized. But what you do with this information starting right now is entirely within your control. The first food actively feeding cancer cells in your body is refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup. Now, I know you've heard sugar is bad. Everyone knows that. But what most people don't understand is the mechanistic relationship between sugar consumption and cancer cell proliferation. This isn't about empty calories or weight gain. This is about direct metabolic signaling that cancer cells exploit. When you consume refined sugar, your blood glucose spikes rapidly. Your pancreas responds by flooding your bloodstream with insulin. Insulin is a growth hormone. Its job is to tell cells to grow, divide, and store energy. Normal cells need insulin to function, but cancer cells have upregulated insulin receptors on their surface. They've essentially installed extra antennas to pick up that growth signal. Research from the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center found that cancer cells can have up to 10 times more insulin receptors than normal cells. What this means is that every time you spike your insulin, you're sending a preferential growth signal directly to any cancer cells present in your body. But it gets worse. High insulin levels also increase something called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. Think of IGF-1 as insulin's aggressive younger brother. While insulin tells cells to grow, IGF-1 tells them to grow faster and resist death signals. Normal cells have a built-in self-destruct program called apoptosis. When a cell becomes damaged or defective, it's supposed to recognize that and shut itself down. Cancer cells have disabled this program. IGF-1 reinforces that resistance, making cancer cells even more resistant to your immune system's attempts to eliminate them. A landmark study published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation followed over 60,000 women for 16 years. What they found was striking. Women in the highest quartile of sugar consumption had a 41% increased risk of developing breast cancer compared to those in the lowest quartile. This wasn't about total calories or body weight. This was about the metabolic signaling created by chronic sugar consumption. Now here's the part that most people miss. Fructose, which makes up half of table sugar and most of high fructose corn syrup, is even more problematic. Unlike glucose, which every cell in your body can use, fructose is processed almost exclusively by your liver. When you consume large amounts of fructose, your liver converts it to fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. This creates visceral fat, the dangerous fat wrapped around your organs. But it also does something more insidious. It creates an inflammatory environment in the liver and throughout the body. Chronic inflammation is like gasoline on the fire of cancer development. Researchers at Harvard Medical School demonstrated that fructose doesn't just feed cancer cells, it actually changes their metabolism in ways that make them more aggressive. In their study, when cancer cells were grown in the presence of fructose versus glucose, the fructose-fed cancer cells showed increased proliferation and enhanced ability to metastasize. The mechanism involves a metabolic pathway that allows cancer cells to use fructose to synthesize nucleic acids, the building blocks of DNA, which they need to rapidly divide. The second food feeding cancer cells is refined vegetable oils high in omega-6 fatty acids. We're talking about soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, and sunflower oil. These oils are in everything: salad dressings, mayonnaise, packaged snacks, fried foods, baked goods, margarine. The average person now consumes these oils at levels that would have been unthinkable a century ago. Here's why this matters for cancer. Your body needs fatty acids to build cell membranes, produce signaling molecules, and regulate inflammation. There are two essential fatty acid families, omega-3 and omega-6. The key word is balance. For most of human evolution, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in the diet was roughly 1:1, or at most 4:1. In the modern Western diet, that ratio has skyrocketed to 15:1 or even 20:1, almost entirely due to the massive increase in refined vegetable oil consumption. Omega-6 fatty acids are metabolic precursors to pro-inflammatory compounds. One omega-6 fat, called arachidonic acid, is converted by an enzyme called COX-T2 into prostaglandins and other eicosanoids that promote inflammation. Now, inflammation isn't inherently bad. Acute inflammation is how your body responds to injury and infection. But chronic low-grade inflammation is a completely different beast. It creates an environment where cancer cells thrive. Think of chronic inflammation like a smoldering fire in your body. That fire constantly releases reactive oxygen species and inflammatory cytokines that damage DNA in surrounding cells. Every time DNA gets damaged, there's a small chance of a mutation that pushes a cell toward cancer. Your cells have repair mechanisms, but when inflammation is chronic, those mechanisms get overwhelmed. It's like trying to repair a roof during a hurricane. Eventually, the damage accumulates. Penn State University published research demonstrating that omega-6 fatty acids don't just promote inflammation, they directly enhance cancer cell growth and metastasis. In their study, mice fed high omega-6 diets showed dramatically accelerated tumor growth compared to those fed balanced omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. The mechanism involves omega-6 metabolites activating signaling pathways that tell cancer cells to proliferate and invade surrounding tissue. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. When you consume these refined oils, they get incorporated into your cell membranes. Your cell membranes are not static structures. They're fluid, dynamic environments where critical cellular signaling happens. When your membranes are built from omega-6 fats instead of omega-3 fats, the signaling changes. It becomes pro-inflammatory, pro-growth, and pro-cancer. A meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Cancer analyzed data from over 35,000 participants across multiple studies. They found that high dietary intake of omega-6 fatty acids was associated with increased risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal cancer. The dose-response relationship was clear. The more omega-6 consumed relative to omega-3, the higher the cancer risk. The third food actively feeding cancer cells is processed meat. We're talking about bacon, sausage, hot dogs, deli meats, and ham. In 2015, the World Health Organization classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning there is sufficient evidence that it causes cancer in humans. It's in the same classification category as tobacco and asbestos. Yet most people continue eating it daily without understanding the mechanisms driving that risk. Processed meats contain several problematic compounds. First, they're typically preserved with nitrites and nitrates. In your digestive system, particularly in the acidic environment of your stomach, these compounds can convert into N-nitroso compounds, which are potent carcinogens. These compounds directly damage DNA, creating mutations that can initiate cancer. Second, when meat is cooked at high temperatures, especially grilling, frying, or barbecuing, it forms heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These are formed when amino acids and creatine in muscle meat react under high heat. Both compound classes are mutagenic, meaning they cause DNA mutations. Studies have consistently shown that people who consume well-done or charred meat have higher rates of colorectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. But there's a third mechanism that gets less attention. Processed meat consumption dramatically alters your gut microbiome. Your intestines contain trillions of bacteria that perform essential functions, including training your immune system, producing vitamins, and maintaining the integrity of your gut barrier. When you consume processed meat regularly, it shifts your microbiome towards species that produce toxic metabolites. One compound that gets produced is trimethylamine, which your liver converts to trimethylamine N oxide, or TMAO. Research from the Cleveland Clinic demonstrated that elevated TMAO levels are associated with increased cancer risk, particularly colorectal cancer. The mechanism involves TMAO promoting inflammation and increasing the permeability of your gut barrier, allowing bacterial toxins to enter your bloodstream. Researchers at the University of Leeds followed over 47,000 participants for 17 years. They found that consuming just 50 grams of processed meat daily, that's less than 2 slices of bacon, increased colorectal cancer risk by 18%. The relationship was dose-dependent. The more processed meat consumed, the higher the risk. Here's what's particularly concerning. Processed meat doesn't just increase cancer initiation, it also appears to accelerate cancer progression once it's started. A study published in Cancer Research found that mice with existing tumors showed significantly faster tumor growth when fed processed meat compared to those fed unprocessed protein sources. The mechanism appears to involve heme iron, the form of iron found in red meat. Hemi-iron catalyzes the formation of carcinogenic compounds in the digestive tract and promotes oxidative stress. The fourth food feeding cancer cells is ultra-processed foods containing emulsifiers and artificial additives. This is a broad category, but we're talking about foods with ingredient lists that read like a chemistry experiment. Carboxymethyl cellulose, polysorbate 80, carrageenan, artificial colors, artificial flavors, and dozens of other compounds that don't exist in nature. These additives serve various purposes for food manufacturers, extending shelf life, improving texture, enhancing color, intensifying flavor. But your body didn't evolve consuming these compounds, and the research on their effects is deeply troubling. Let's focus on emulsifiers, which are added to countless processed foods to prevent separation and improve texture. They're in ice cream, salad dressings, baked goods, and plant-based milk alternatives. Research from Georgia State University demonstrated that common emulsifiers directly disrupt the mucus layer that protects your intestinal lining. Think of your gut lining like a fortress wall. The mucus layer is the moat that keeps bacteria at a safe distance from the wall itself. Emulsifiers act like they're draining that moat. When your gut barrier becomes compromised, a condition called increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut, bacterial components and food particles that should stay in your digestive tract enter your bloodstream. Your immune system recognizes these as foreign invaders and mounts an inflammatory response. But unlike an acute infection that resolves, this becomes chronic low-grade inflammation because you're constantly consuming the compounds that break down your gut barrier. This chronic inflammation doesn't just increase cancer risk through DNA damage. It also exhausts your immune system. Your immune cells that should be patrolling for cancer cells are instead constantly responding to the bacterial invasion from your gut. It's like a police force that's so busy responding to false alarms that they miss the actual burglaries happening across town. A study published in Nature found that mice fed emulsifier-containing diets developed low-grade inflammation, metabolic syndrome, and showed increased rates of colorectal cancer. When researchers transplanted the gut bacteria from emulsifier-fed mice into germ-free mice, those mice developed the same inflammatory changes, proving the effect was mediated through disruption of the microbiome. But it's not just emulsifiers. Artificial food dyes have been linked to DNA damage and tumor promotion in multiple studies. Sodium benzoate, a common preservative, can form benzene, a known carcinogen, under certain conditions. The cocktail effect of consuming multiple additives simultaneously has barely been studied, but the limited research suggests synergistic harmful effects. A comprehensive analysis published in the British Medical Journal followed over 100,000 participants for 5 years. They found that every 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption was associated with a 12% increased risk of overall cancer and an 11% increased risk of breast cancer specifically. Now here's what you need to understand. These 4 food categories don't operate in isolation. They create a compounding effect. The person consuming daily sugary drinks, cooking with refined vegetable oils, eating processed meat sandwiches, and snacking on ultra-processed foods isn't experiencing 4 separate risk factors. They're creating a systematic metabolic environment that cancer cells exploit at every level. High sugar consumption spikes insulin and IGF-1, sending growth signals. Omega-6 oils create inflammatory cell membranes. Processed meat damages DNA and disrupts the microbiome. Ultra-processed additives break down gut barrier integrity and exhaust immune surveillance. Together, these create the perfect storm for cancer development and progression. Let me tell you exactly what to do, starting right now. First, eliminate all sugar-sweetened beverages. This includes soda, sweet tea, energy drinks, and most fruit juices. These are the single largest source of refined sugar in the modern diet and provide 0 nutritional value. Replace them with water, unsweetened tea, or black coffee. Second, read ingredient labels and avoid any product where sugar appears in the first 3 ingredients. Sugar hides under dozens of names: high fructose corn syrup, cane juice, agave nectar, dextrose, maltose. They're all sugar. Your target is less than 25 grams of added sugar daily total. Third, replace refined vegetable oils with extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or coconut oil for cooking. Clean out your pantry. If a product contains soybean oil, corn oil, or cottonseed oil, eliminate it. This single change will dramatically shift your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Fourth, eliminate all processed meats. No bacon, sausage, deli meat, or hot dogs. If you eat meat, choose unprocessed cuts and avoid high-temperature cooking methods. If you must grill, marinate meat first in acidic marinades containing lemon juice or vinegar, which significantly reduces formation of carcinogenic compounds. Fifth, adopt the 5-ingredient rule for packaged foods. If a product has more than 5 ingredients or contains ingredients you can't pronounce, don't buy it. This simple rule eliminates nearly all ultra-processed foods containing problematic additives. Here's the clinical reality from 15 years of emergency medicine. I cannot tell you how many patients I've seen diagnosed with advanced cancer who tell me the same thing. I wish I had known earlier. I wish someone had told me what I could do. You're hearing it now. This information isn't theoretical. It's based on thousands of peer-reviewed studies and decades of clinical observation. Your body possesses remarkable cancer defense systems. Natural killer cells patrol your bloodstream hunting for abnormal cells. Tumor suppressor genes like p53 act as quality control, forcing damaged cells into self-destruction. DNA repair mechanisms fix mutations before they become permanent. But these systems need the right environment to function. You cannot out-exercise or out-supplement a diet that's systematically feeding cancer cells while crippling your immune defenses. Let's lock in everything we covered. Cancer cells require specific metabolic conditions to thrive. Refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup spike insulin and IGF-1, sending growth signals preferentially to cancer cells while providing the massive glucose they need for their altered metabolism. Refined vegetable oils high in omega-6 create chronic inflammation through pro-inflammatory metabolites and change your cell membrane composition in ways that promote cancer signaling. Processed meats contain nitrites that form carcinogenic N-nitroso compounds, create cancer-promoting compounds when cooked at high temperatures, and disrupt your gut microbiome. Ultra-processed foods containing emulsifiers and artificial additives break down your gut barrier integrity, create chronic inflammation, and exhaust immune surveillance. The solution isn't complicated. Eliminate these 4 food categories starting today. Replace refined sugar with whole fruits. Replace vegetable oils with olive oil and avocado oil. Replace processed meats with unprocessed protein sources or plant proteins. Replace ultra-processed foods with whole foods that don't require ingredient labels because they only contain 1 ingredient. Here's what I need you to understand. Your health is not predetermined by your genetics. The vast majority of cancer cases are influenced by modifiable factors. You have far more control than you've been led to believe. Every single meal is an opportunity to create a cellular environment where cancer cannot thrive. If this information was useful, I need you to do 2 things. First, share this video with someone you care about who needs to hear this. Second, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and ensures you don't miss the evidence-based health content I release weekly. Check out my other videos where I break down the specific foods that activate your body's built-in cancer defense systems and exactly how to incorporate them into your daily routine. The body you'll have 12 months from now is being built by what you eat consistently, starting right now. Dr. Leana out.